Welcome to the Write Your Own Story podcast. I'm your host, Betsy Leonidas, and the founder of the Write Your Own Story company. Girl, I can tell you right now, you are definitely enough. Here we value service, sisterhood, connection, laughter, and that super genuine, keep it real, tell you like it is honesty. My hope is at the end of each episode, you realize you can do whatever it is you dream about and that you are not alone with what you struggle with. I'm hoping that you are snapping and clapping and hell yes in your way through each one of these episodes. So if this tracks with you, let's get started. I'm so glad you're here. All right, everyone. Welcome back to the latest episode of the Write Your Own Story podcast. I am your host, Betsy Leonidas, and I am so thrilled to be here with Tracy Cook from ProKids. Tracy, thank you so much for being here.
Betsy, thanks for having me.
I am just so excited to have your energy on this couch. We have been chatting off camera for a little bit now, and I was like, fine, we'll start recording because it has been an absolute delight thus far. Jennifer Loeb, our dear friend from Ronald McDonald House and from Life, suggested that we meet and that we do this together. And God almighty, was she right? It is just, I can already tell this is going to be an amazing conversation. You're a phenomenal woman, and I am so excited for everyone to hear what you have to share. So thank you for being here. Would you mind giving us a quick rundown? Actually, before we do that, let me set the episode intention because we're going to dive into some really great, big, juicy stuff. So ProKids is an organization that helps kids within the Hamilton County court system who come from abuse and neglect. And so what we really want to do today, really grounding us in that tension, is around, I'm going to read it because I really want to get this right. Mobilize our community to break the vicious cycle of child abuse and neglect. So I had read in one of the articles that you were published in that you can stand on, there really is no sidelines for this. You know, it's hard to talk about, it's hard to think about, but it's critically important. So I really want everyone to open their hearts and minds and be curious about this. It's a lot, but these kids deserve our hearts and minds. So would you mind giving us a quick bio about yourself and telling us about ProKids?
Sure. So my name is Tracy Cook. I'm ProKids Executive Director. And I've been with ProKids since, if you can imagine, 1992.
Amazing.
I started as a CASA volunteer with ProKids, a court-appointed special advocate, joined the staff in 93, and have been the executive director since 98.
Oh my gosh.
So I do like to tell people who think it's crazy to stay with one organization for so long. First of all, you can't beat the vision of a safe, permanent, nurturing home for every child. And two, the way we've been able to grow and change and adapt. I've had multiple tours of duty.
Totally. I'm sure it's been multiple versions of a company that feels like a different company every time. That's it's great perspective. And what a important role, but also an amazing landscape that it can evolve and adapt.
And I'm just so glad that I found ProKids when I was looking. You know, I think I was typical of a lot of folks in either undergrad or grad school who know more what they don't want to do than what they do.
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to do something in the public interest, and quite frankly, selfishly wanted to have the biggest impact I could have.
That's not selfish.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
Oh.
And so knowing that working to benefit children was the way to do that, I felt very lucky to find out about ProKids, started volunteering for them, and the rest is history. And ProKids' vision, that safe, permanent, nurturing home for every child, the way we go about achieving that vision is by mobilizing our community. Yeah. So people just like you and me to speak up for our kids and help guide them to safe environments where they actually have an opportunity to thrive.
Because truly the cards have been dealt against them. And they are so lucky to have someone in their corner. So you are a lawyer, right? And so, okay. So you went to UC, I think you had mentioned, for law, obviously, not to be a genius. And you are a mom of two plus a dog mom. So that's a mom of three.
That's right.
We're joking because I sent her pre-questions and I was like, how do you take care of yourself as a mom of three? Which is a copy and paste from a previous interview. She was like, actually, I only have two children, but you were so kind to be like, but I do have a dog. Thank you for being so nice. That was my blunder.
That's right. No, my daughters insist that she's the third child. So.
I love it. Okay, good. I knew that. Yeah, I absolutely knew that. Yeah. Okay. And then did you do any previous work between your graduation and getting into this?
Yeah. And so again, that whole idea of knowing more what you don't want to do than what you do want to do. I worked for a local judge who was extraordinarily well respected. And I think about anyone who's leaving the educational environment, I often tell them what you're looking for is your next teacher. His name was Robert A. Wood, and could not have had a better teacher in terms of ethics and public service and that sort of thing. And kind of simultaneous in working with him, I started volunteering for ProKids. And when an attorney position opened up at ProKids, I jumped at it.
Yeah.
And I tell people, find a job you love. You'll never work another day in your life. So
amen to that.
Extraordinarily privileged to be able to do this work.
Oh, I love that so much for you. And I think that, so many of us have started our careers. I was in marketing and advertising, and I truly love it. There's so many facets of it that are so interesting and have been able to take me to other parts of my career. But the notion of doing something that you just absolutely love, I agree. This podcast has never once felt like work.
Yeah, that's
even
awesome.
On the hardest days.
Yeah.
I'm like, still, this is just so fulfilling. And I'm glad that you have that as well. And don't you feel that so many women, maybe men as well, start down career paths and they're like, but this is what I said I was going to do. And I have to excel, and I will, as we were talking off camera, be perfect and, thrive, etc. And then I love this notion that you're sort of referencing of collecting data of actually, this is not what I want to do.
Yeah.
I say in life, in this chapter of my life, I'm like, I love closed doors because it's just a clear no. I'm like, okay, got it. Now I'm going to go find a different door. But like this whole notion of collecting all your no's to figure out what your yes is.
Absolutely. And I think, I think a lot of people, women and men, don't really allow themselves the thought of, if I really truly did what I wanted to do, what would it be? I think there are a lot of practical considerations, of course, but sometimes we close the doors rather than letting kind of the universe, the world, society close the doors. And someone I work with often says, let the world tell you no, don't tell yourself no.
Oh, goodness gracious. Did everyone hear that? It's so true. It really is. And, sort of, I was talking to my best friend before we were recording, and we were talking about like manifesting and, just half tongue in cheek, but half also like for real.
Right.
And it's just sort of this notion of like, you put out there what you want and you go towards those steps and, you move forward with intention, but sort of letting go of the how and the when. And the what, sort of like, the final product, those doors will naturally close, and the ones that you're, will continue to open. And like, when you can get to that practice, that level of practice, even as it applies to your professional life, it is so incredibly liberating.
I think that's, something that I think about a lot is also that if you allow yourself to rush toward sometimes the thing that you can't stand that exists in the world, that's another thing to honor in yourself. And so many people tell us that when they see another story about a child who's being abused or neglected, they start to feel helpless and they turn away.
It's like overwhelming and they kind of shut it off. Is that
absolutely?
Okay.
I mean, it's a perfectly natural reaction.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Absolutely. But I think the other thing to think about is, that action is often said to be the antidote for despair. And so that's really what we're doing, is inviting the community to come in and take action on behalf of these children.
Okay, let's do this is going to be the hard part, but let's do some stage setting for what are you seeing around what, I think I might be one of those people where this is hard to think about, but I want my eyes opened. What is abuse and neglect? Like, what are we seeing for these children?
So part of what I talk about is just the sheer volume. I think one of the most stunning things for most people I talk to is just how many calls the county hotline gets. It's called 2-for-1 Kids, and it's the centralized intake for all allegations of abuse and neglect. It's part of Hamilton County Job and Family Services. And I'll ask people, volunteers when we're training them, what's your guess about how many calls are made in a year just for Hamilton County? And most people will say 1,000, maybe 3,000, maybe 5,000. They are stunned to find out that it's 50,000 calls or more a year just for Hamilton County.
And just for kids.
Correct.
Oh my God.
So now what that means is these are calls where people suspect abuse and neglect. It doesn't definitively mean because they've called, that's what's happened. And the county has a very heavy and weighty responsibility to investigate.
Yeah.
But what happens in any given year is the worst of the worst situations where abuse and neglect is substantiated after investigation. If there are not ways to keep the kids safe short of court action, the county files with Hamilton County Juvenile Court, and it's often seeking permission to remove the children from their families and place them in foster care. In any given year in our community as of late, there are between anywhere from 3,000 to 3,800 kids that have come under the court's jurisdiction due to maltreatment.
Goodness.
And so, that number has grown over time. Certainly things like the opioid epidemic helped fuel that. But we were also just seeing more abuse of all kinds, physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, etc. And so, just thinking about the vast majority of people who are listening to this and in our larger community, they maybe have known someone who experienced child abuse and neglect, but they have no idea that there are kids probably sitting today in their child's classroom right next to them.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the most dangerous aspects is the myths that we have to bust are numerous.
Yeah.
But the biggest myth we have to bust is that someone else has got this. And the fact is, these kids are hidden from view. But what I know, and I think about all the time, is that as you were going about your day today, if you were driving and saw a 2-year-old in this cold weather and nothing but a diaper alone on the side of the road on the curb about to step into it, you would slam on your brakes and scoop that child up. Our kids are no less need, they're just hidden.
Oh God. My heart just drops. And it's so true. They're that helpless, exposed, sort of metaphorically, literally, abandoned, even when they are surrounded by people. Goodness, that is like a really, really powerful metaphor. And so by not opening our eyes and talking about it and being curious about it, you're driving past the child on the road, essentially.
That's exactly right. And I think the other thing that perhaps won't surprise people is to learn that child, their parents, probably also experienced child maltreatment.
Yes.
And so
cycle.
it's a vicious cycle. And so the joy of the work that we get to do is help not only break that vicious cycle of abuse and neglect that's typically span generations within a family,
Yes,
but help create a new cycle of growing up safe and confident. And so what that really means is, as a CASA volunteer, you have the opportunity not just to help change the arc of the child's life before you, the one that you're assigned to, but you're actually helping change their future children's lives.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That hits so deeply to think about, that so often when I have conversations with women, this is a bit of a tangent, which I pre-warned you, this is my thing. But that, we speak so unkindly to ourselves. And then so often we can check in and be like, would I speak to my daughter this way? What would I say if my daughter was doing this way? And so often we think about our next generation. But to think about this notion of breaking the cycle, one might be so hyper-focused on getting this one child safe, but truly the ripple effect as it goes down generations is unbelievably impactful. And when we think about that 50,000 volume calls, can we whittle that number down over decades just with the sort of long-term effect of the great work that you guys are doing?
That's exactly right. I mean, that's the ultimate goal. And when you think about the fact that very often the parents we're working with have their own childhood trauma where they didn't receive help to be safe. They didn't receive services to help them heal. So that pattern can be recreated. There's an enormous amount of empathy for the parents. And that might sound surprising to some folks because some people think all you have to do is get them away from those quote unquote terrible parents.
Right.
It's not quite that simple. And in fact, our first goal is to have kids be reunified with parents who've learned to parent differently whenever possible.
Yeah.
If that's not possible, we look for relatives, family, friends. And if that's not possible, we look for the possibility of adoption.
Yeah. Okay. So if we're thinking about these children who are identified for abuse and neglect, they are then put in the juvenile system for protection. And we'll get into sort of what that means and what that looks like. But then when we're thinking about how can we educate these parents to be better parents and to help heal these parents, what does that look like? Like, are they put into like a quote unquote system, or what are the resources for them?
Yeah.
I know, again, tangent. Hi.
No, not at all.
But
It's not a tangent. It's all related. It's all connected, because here's the surprising thing. So we talked about these calls that people might make to 2-for-1 kids. It might be a neighbor, a relative, a coach, a teacher, a healthcare professional making a report. When Hamilton County Job and Family Services investigates, if they have substantiated the allegation of abuse and neglect, and if they can't do anything without court intervention that would help lessen the risk to the child, that is when a case will be filed by the county through the prosecutor's office in Hamilton County Juvenile Court.
Okay.
Now, most people, when they think of juvenile court, they think of delinquency,
right.
Traffic tickets.
You're going to juvie. Yeah, totally.
But they don't understand that juvenile court has very broad jurisdiction that includes all the things people kind of typically think of, but also things like custody for parents that were not married, and also then these child protection cases. Now, some people, because of the news stories they see that are typically ending with the phrase, and the child is in foster care, they have no idea what that means. They think it's an ending to a story, when in fact it is really just the beginning of a whole new journey.
Yes.
And so what that journey looks like is, first of all, that people would understand that it makes sense. The government can't simply come in your home and take your child. A court has to oversee all of this. So even if it's 2:00 in the morning, overnight tonight,
yes,
someone calls 2-for-1 Kids. Let's say there's a domestic violence dispute going on. The police respond. They determine they're going to arrest both of the parents. There's no adult in sight to care for these children. The police themselves are going to call 2-for-1 Kids. The 2-for-1 Kids caseworker is going to come out, investigate the situation, and if they feel that they need to place the kids in foster care, they're actually going to call a court officer. Someone's on duty 24 hours a day. This is a magistrate, an attorney that is appointed by our judges to hear these types of cases. And they will literally have a hearing over the phone.
Oh my gosh.
To either grant or deny the county permission to take the child into care.
Wow.
And so that is just the very beginning. And once that happens, the court maintains oversight of this child, approving everything from the removal to where the child's going to be placed to what services they're going to be provided to heal. But ultimately, what we're doing at ProKids is we're best interest advocates that are part of this proceeding. And we're making recommendations to the court about all of those things.
Yeah.
And ultimately, who should raise the child.
Wow. My goodness. One other question I had was, so if there are 50,000 calls coming in and 3,000 are the ones that are ending up in the system, what drives the discrepancy in those numbers?
So part of it is, if you think about someone calling and believe that they suspect child abuse for some reason, it could be a variety of things. One, it could be something where what they're alleging actually would not meet the threshold. So somebody might say,
what is the threshold?
It's an art, not a science. But an example of that would be someone calls and says, my niece is spanking her child. I don't agree with that. Well, absent marks, physical injury, that wouldn't typically be viewed as in any way abusive. Somebody might call and say, I hear what I know is the sound of a hand smacking on flesh and a child screaming in pain multiple times a day. And the 2-for-1 Kids worker might say, where is this? And the person might respond, well, I live in a very large old apartment building. Sound travels weirdly. Every apartment has children. I can't tell you which one it is. Even if that might rise to an allegation of abuse and neglect, there's not enough information for them to investigate.
Yeah.
So both thresholds have to be crossed.
Interesting.
And then again, it's some people think, well, the county must simply always remove kids who are abused and neglected. And that's not true. It's about how to be able to lessen the risk. So if it's, let's say, a situation of neglect, there's not enough food in the house, the county's going to do things to help there be enough food in the house. They wouldn't seek to automatically remove the child.
Yes.
So that's how we kind of winnow down from the huge number of calls to the number of children who actually go so far into the child protection system, whose cases are considered the worst of the worst, and come under the court's jurisdiction.
Yeah. And that's an important example of food on the table. Neglect is not just physical or sexual. It can just be, access to food, access to shelter,
Right,
access.
right.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
poverty is a huge overlay in all of this.
Sure. Yeah.
And, the more children that can be lifted out of poverty, the less likely they're going to experience this type of maltreatment.
Yeah. My goodness. As you may know, Cincinnati Children's Hospital is near and dear to my heart. If you don't, check out the episode, A Story of Miracles, to be inspired. Not only did they save my daughter's life, but they've saved countless lives each and every day through their exceptional care, tireless research, and so much more. I wanted to find a creative way to not only support women, but to give back to the hospital I hold so dear, and I think I've come up with something really fun and exciting. Okay, I'm just going to shoot you straight here. One of the ways for a podcast to make money is for people to subscribe, aka contribute money to support the show. As exciting as a new way to make money is for me, I wanted to turn this into an opportunity for others. So if you choose to subscribe for as little as $3 a month, where you can cancel at any time, you can submit a friend or a women-owned business to get a special shout out on the podcast, and half of your subscription money will go directly to Cincinnati Children's, supporting their needs in life-saving research and care. This feels amazing to me because everybody wins. Your bestie, your business, the hospital, and the show are all being supported through this effort. Click the support our show link in the show notes today to not only get a shout out, but to support the #1 pediatric hospital in the world. Okay, so that certainly sets the landscape for what these kids are experiencing, how the sort of system works in terms of, okay, the alarm bells are set, people are sort of activated to go out, and it can literally happen over the phone. And then one of the things that I would love to outline is that you said when these children were the worst of the worst and they get into the foster care system, that this is truly just the beginning of their journey. I think, we've heard of these organizations that provide suitcases for these kids because they're truly just taking their belongings bag to bag, but in bags, excuse me. Can you walk us through just kind of what makes you say this is the beginning of their journey?
So part of the reason it's a beginning is if the court grants what's called temporary custody to Hamilton County Job and Family Services, it's as if the county stands in the place of the parent as far as being the custodian. But the county also, in addition to providing for the child, ensuring a safe foster care placement, ensuring access to services, that sort of thing, they also have an obligation to provide what are called reunification services to the parents. And these are services that are designed to remedy the conditions that led to the child's removal in the first place. That grant of temporary custody to Job and Family Services is initially a year with a possible 2 6-month extensions. Now, it doesn't mean the child can't exit the child protection system before that, but it is very common for kids to be in this temporary status for up to 2 years.
Interesting. And then could they re-enter the temporary status?
It's possible, but essentially what happens at the end of that 2-year time frame is another dispositional alternative has to be sought and awarded by the court. So it could be a reunification, a remand of custody back to parents. It could be a grant of custody to relatives or family friends. It could be a modification to what's called permanent custody, which is in essence a termination of parental rights, and it frees the child for adoption.
Yes. Oh my goodness. And then when you had mentioned, okay, it's sort of assumed that these parents are just quote unquote terrible parents. But you had mentioned that your top sort of objective is to get them back with their families or biological families. Can you walk us through some of the research behind that why is that best when these people are potentially the source of neglect and abuse?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, there's a lot of research about how kids do better with family, with bio parents, with relatives, etc. But I think also what we have to kind of step back is and think about what might be our first instinct when we hear about child abuse and neglect. And it's to say, I would never do that under any circumstance. But we also have to understand what it might be like to be a parent with very little resource, have no childcare, have a colicky baby, have no help.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the things that it's very important for us to realize the circumstances.
Yeah. And tap into that empathy again.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, and those circumstances, if those circumstances can be changed, just like other folks in our community are having, loving relationships with their children without the presence of abuse and neglect, there are circumstances you can change around parents that will result in that as well.
Yeah.
And so I think that can be stunning to people. I mean, think of substance abuse alone. I remember a case where we worked with a younger teen. She was an only child. Her mother was in the throes of untreated alcoholism, and the teen was removed. The mother went into inpatient treatment. She was not particularly motivated or engaged in treatment. And our CASA volunteer had just this incredible epiphany about a conversation she needed to have with the mom. So she went to see the mom in her treatment setting and said to her, "Have you noticed how your daughter completely lights up when she sees you?" And the mom said, "Yeah." And the CASA said, "She doesn't do that with anybody else but you." Now, how would the mom know that? She's not there when she's with other people. She wouldn't know that.
Right.
And the mother talked about that being the turning point for her to engage, that this wasn't about her own low self-esteem from her own childhood trauma, that certainly anyone else could parent this child better than her. No, in fact, she was the light in this child's life.
Yes.
And so she completed treatment. She completed aftercare. They reunified. They're together now to this day. And so, it's that kind of insight sometimes that can cause a parent who may on all outward appearances look like they're not trying, they're not able to do this, and actually turn the corner.
Oh God, that's a beautiful story. And that was a lens that I had never considered. Because as we were talking about off camera, it's so hard for me to understand why hurt people. But then also, when you think about like, this is just to find empathy and from like a smaller scale. We all have those moments where we snap at our kids because we're so overwhelmed, right? Like, they're fighting and you've got a million things to do and the house is a disaster and, you've got a big day at work tomorrow, whatever. And you snap and you're like, God, that was not the best version of myself. We can all go back and apologize, explain whatever.
Right.
But like to have such greater circumstances to why they're hurting and how that hurt leaks out. I get it.
Yeah.
But to your point, break the cycle.
Absolutely. And there's just some really practical considerations. I remember once being in a meeting with a family. It was the mother and her sister. So mother and aunt to these children. And the kids had been sexually abused by an extended family member. And someone was talking about in this meeting about the ability and the need to protect the children. And the mom and the aunt started laughing. And we inquired, "Why are you laughing?" And they said, "We have no access to childcare. We have to work. We were all, as you're terming it, sexually abused as children. It's a matter of when, not if.
Yeah.
And if you have no choice about who you leave your child with so that you can go earn money to feed them," it was laughable to them.
Yeah. They're like, it's that ridiculous.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so, that's when we, could realize they hadn't had experience with so-called childcare vouchers or protective daycare or things like that, where they could actually have a safe place to leave the children and not fear for that. It didn't even seem like that was possible.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I can't imagine the amount of overwhelm that comes with that, and to just like being stuck in your circumstances to be like,
yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot of domestic violence and intimate partner violence too that our kids are exposed to.
Yes.
And people become trapped.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And then kids are inadvertently trapped. Hey, busy moms and aspiring entrepreneurs. If you want to learn how to build a high-income business in just 20 hours a week so you can enjoy more time with your kids, all while transforming yourself from overwhelmed to confident in just 90 days, then you need to check out my masterclass. I'm Betsy, a busy mom of 4 and a business coach obsessed with helping women just like you build thriving businesses that fit your life, not the other way around. After 20 years in marketing and building my own nonprofit and e-commerce business, I know exactly what it takes to go from overwhelmed to empowered
empowered. That's why I created my self-paced digital masterclass designed to help you move forward with clarity and confidence. So whether you're starting from scratch or recalibrating an existing business, my masterclass will take you from stuck and overwhelmed to simplified, organized, confident, and clear in your next steps. If you want to learn things like how to create a successful business that aligns with your personal life and brings you happiness, if you want to learn how to acquire the confidence and strategies needed to overcome self-doubt and thrive in your entrepreneurial journey, if you want to obtain the knowledge and tools to take control of your business finances with confidence, if you want to gain essential skills and strategies to effectively promote your business with confidence and ease, and if you want to discover practical strategies and systems to manage the challenges of entrepreneurship, then you should absolutely check out the 5-section self-paced digital masterclass from the Female Founders Academy. It's just $597, plus every course comes with free worksheets to guide you through. Learn on your own time, at your own pace, in the privacy of your home. So if you want to learn how to build a high-income business in just 20 hours a week so you can enjoy more time with your kids, all while transforming yourself from overwhelmed to confident in just 90 days, then visit writeyourownstory.co/FFA-courses or click the link in the show notes below.
Okay, so let's say a kid enters the foster care system and they are placed with foster care parents. I would just like to paint the picture a little bit again from an awareness perspective about, we had talked about off camera about these kids who sort of test and when they're in these kind of like, and you had also mentioned that in Hamilton County, there's a huge gap in foster care families. Can we talk a little bit more about foster care?
Yeah. So first of all, foster care parents, I mean, it's an amazing thing they've signed up to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're opening both their homes and their hearts to our children,
Mm-hmm.
and well know that these kids, may go back home, either to parents or to relatives. Foster care is completely privatized in Hamilton County. And what I mean by that is the county doesn't directly license any foster care homes. It's all through private networks. And unfortunately, for nearly as long as I've been doing this work, there have not been enough foster care homes in Hamilton County to absorb the number of children that are being removed from their families.
Mm.
So it's been very common in some years to have around 40% of kids who are removed from families in Hamilton County be placed outside of Hamilton County throughout the state of Ohio. Foster care parents are the physical custodian of the child, but the county holds custody. And I think sometimes people, just generally in our community think, oh, well, if they're in foster care, then everything's fine. They must be safe. They must have a path to permanency.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's not always true.
Yeah.
There are amazing foster care parents who change children's lives. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes there are ones where we even have to advocate for the child to be removed from that placement. Mm. But what you were referencing about some of the bouncing that it's sometimes termed that foster care kids do, and it's not unusual for a child to have a different foster care home every year they're in foster care.
Oh my gosh.
And that is very traumatic to them overall. It means educational loss,
right?
Moving to new schools. But part of what kids do, it's a form of logic sometimes, is especially teens, for example. They may think, I'm not going to invest in you till I know you're invested in me. Mm-hmm. The example I often give is a kid who, within 30 minutes of arriving in a foster care home, found a can of spray paint and spray painted the side of the garage. Mm-hmm. That was a test.
Yeah.
A foster care parent might give their notice and say, you're going to need to remove this child. So a child could bounce and bounce and bounce and bounce. Mm. The other thing that can cause bouncing sometimes is what we sometimes refer to as anniversary dates. The child happened to be removed a certain time of year. Let's say it's Halloween. Mm-hmm. Halloween's always going to be rough. Mm. And so part of what our staff and our volunteers are doing is working with foster care parents to say, hey, Halloween's probably going to be rough the 2 weeks leading up. So why don't we start talking to the therapist now about how to get things in place so this child can get through this period and you're not asking for them to be removed, because the last thing we want to do is see this child lose their placement. So there can be a variety of reasons that kids move from one home to another.
And then is it common for foster families to have have one foster child and then a different foster child come in. So we're sort of just like piling these people on. And then it's sort of also the dynamic of these children as well. That sounds very challenging as well.
Yeah, that's very insightful of you, because imagine in that example I gave you, if it's 2:00 in the morning this evening, the police respond to this DV situation, determine they're going to arrest both parents, calls 241 Kids. 241 Kids decides, yes, we need to place these kids in foster care, calls the magistrate, wakes them up, seeks permission. Let's say the magistrate grants permission.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they will have pre-identified a foster care home to take kids to if there's a possibility of that, but sometimes they don't have one identified yet. They'll go back to Job and Family Services. They'll look for a home, and further late into the night, they're transporting these kids to a foster care parent. They're providing what little information they have to the foster care parent about these kids.
Yeah.
And to your point, because we're using every available space for foster care children in Hamilton County, if they're licensed for 4 homes, and there are 2 kids or 4 children in their home, and there are 2 kids already there, here come these other 2. You have no idea in advance how this is all going to mesh, how they're going to get along with each other. So it's hard for everybody. And we always think of the child thinking, where am I?
Where am I? Literally, I was just at home 2 hours ago.
Correct.
And now I'm in a stranger's home.
Correct.
With other children.
Correct. Where the sounds may be different outside.
Oh, yeah.
Kids have sometimes talked to us about the pillow smells different than the one I'm used to.
Yeah.
Sometimes slightly funny things where they say, is this a home where if you get up in the middle of the night and have to use the restroom, do you put the seat down or do you flush? Just, you know what I mean?
Right. Just little idiosyncrasies that make home.
Exactly. Exactly. And so all of that makes this very complicated.
Gosh.
When you layer on also the trauma that these kids have experienced and how, kids often react to trauma with their behavior.
Yes.
These are all layers of what makes, this very complicated.
I mean, we just think about our own children who are anxious about having sleepovers at their friends' houses and are like, Mom, can you come get me? I heard a weird sound. My pillow smells different, etc. Let alone layer on strangers and trauma and the middle of the night and just such a ever evolving dynamic. And who do you trust? Which makes sense why everyone is testing. And then as a foster parent to be able to withstand said tests.
Right.
Amongst whatever other challenges sound so insensitive, but whatever other challenges these children have to be able to support them through that. God, that's no small feat.
That's right.
Oh my goodness. Oh, the work. And so the reason that ProKids is around and that CASAs are there, if I understand correctly, is really to be that forever advocate for the child. Like that would be that face that is familiar, that knows mom, that knows the magistrate, that knows, that has read the phone call to 241 and really truly is like, no, I mean, it almost feels like the cozy parent.
Yeah. I mean, what our CASA volunteers do is they literally become the expert in the child. And what I mean by that is that there is no system professional that has the luxury of time that a CASA volunteer has to get to know children. Our CASAs typically have a single sibling set at a time, which on average is 2 kids. And so they're able to spend what we sometimes call porch sitting time to really get to know the kids, really understand their needs, and then advocate for them. And, the first thing that they're doing, and they're working in conjunction with a ProKids staff member known as a CASA manager and also a ProKids staff attorney.
Okay.
Together, we call the 3 of them an advocacy team.
Yeah.
The first thing that team is doing is making sure that children are safe.
Yes.
Then they're making sure that they have access to services to help them heal. And obviously, they're healing from trauma of being abused and neglected. But they're also healing from the trauma of being taken from the only family they've ever known.
Right.
And placed with a stranger, no matter how well-intentioned.
Totally.
And so what the CASA does is by showing up time and time and time and time and time again, is they build a relationship and trust with that child.
Yeah, earn that trust. Absolutely.
That's right. And that's what allows them to really understand the child's needs. They then come back with all the information they gather from their visits with the child and work with our staff, their CASA manager, to say, okay, what next? What should we do because I observed this particular thing? For example, let's say it's a 9-month-old baby and we train our volunteers on things like developmental milestones. This baby's not really confidently sitting up. What might we need to do? Our CASA managers are amazing. They understand the court system. They understand, child protection system, job and family services. They understand volunteers, but they also understand all these companion systems that touch kids' lives. Social work settings, therapeutic settings, educational settings,
Yes.
medical settings,
Yeah.
all of that. So we are advocating, yes, in court, but we are also advocating within all of these systems outside of court.
That's amazing. And so then within that team structure, basically the CASA is the advocate for the child, but then it is the other two members of the team that sort of like implement or, work within the extended systems.
Yeah.
So
the three of them, they work on developing the plan. What's next?
Yeah.
And so, we have lots of conversations with job and family services caseworkers, with the therapists on cases. You can imagine we talk to teachers a lot, not just for the educational component, but how are they doing? They see them every day at school. How are they showing up? How do they seem to be feeling? And what we're doing is, as best interest advocates appointed by the court, is working to make sure that they're safe, stable, have access to these services to help them heal. But ultimately what we're doing is making recommendations about who should raise the child, whether they should go home, whether they should go to a relative, whether they should be freed for adoption.
Oh my goodness. So these are volunteers, right? So these people are potentially gainfully employed and have families of their own. And how are they able to do all of this and sort of live their other part of their life?
So we do believe in ProKids and allowing your life to interfere with your volunteer experience.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, and the reason we joke about it a little bit is it truly is shocking to people to learn. And we have surveyed our CASAs for 15 plus years about how much time they typically spend. It's about 10 hours a month.
Oh.
And that stuns people.
Yeah, I'm stunned.
Right?
Put me in the group.
Right?
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm stunned. Yeah.
Exactly. So many people think, it must be like a part-time job, 25, 30 hours a week. It's not. And it's also extraordinarily flexible.
Yeah.
In visiting the child, we obviously ask for regular visitation. That can be done on weekends and evenings. Court hearings happen about once a quarter. The only court hearing that wouldn't be scheduled with your calendar in mind is the one that's scheduled before you're assigned to the case.
Yeah.
After that, literally the magistrate will go around the room, say, we're picking the next hearing. Will this date work for folks? The other thing that's come as part of the pandemic is a good portion of our hearings are now on Zoom. And so all pretrials and what are called review hearings are done on Zoom. So the only thing that is done in person typically are full trials.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that makes it so much more digestible. And then, so it sounds like the court very much welcomes the CASA, and like, I'm sure all these extended sort of branches within these children's lives are like, yes, you are the conduit for this. You are like the common connection. So those are welcome.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I mean, what magistrates have very, very just important responsibility, right? I mean, if you think about the impact of any court and the decisions they make, I'm always going to argue that juvenile court with child protection cases have the most long-lasting impact possible. They are literally deciding who's going to raise a child.
Yeah.
And so because of that, and you think about the volume that we've talked about, the number of children, magistrates, who are these hearing officers for Hamilton County Juvenile Court appointed by the judges, they can get down from the bench and investigate themselves. So sometimes they refer to our volunteers as the eyes and ears of the court.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because we are appointed to advocate exclusively on behalf of the child's best interests, that is our role.
Yeah.
And so what we're working to do is provide the kind of background research, information, and recommendations so the court can make the most informed decision possible in the best interests of the child.
I mean, truly, what a gift. Now, is this a nationwide survey? Okay, so these exist. This isn't a Hamilton County specific thing.
No, ProKids happens to be one of the oldest CASA programs in the nation.
Oh,
So
amazing.
it was founded in 1981
Uh-huh.
and was one of fewer than, I think, 30 programs nationwide. At the time, there are about 1,000, but they're all very different. Some involve more limited kind of reporting or role in the court.
Mm-hmm.
They might be investigating and providing a report, but they're not a legal party. At ProKids, we're a legal party to the case. So our legal staff file motions. If we need to go to the Court of Appeals, we'll go to the Court of Appeals. But we have the full kind of continuum of tools
Yes.
to advocate for kids. And so it's a wonderful thing. And many of our volunteers have been with us for a very long time. We have a 5-year luncheon every year, and about 40% of our volunteers qualify for that luncheon.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Not only does that speak to, because you would worry about the emotional toll.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a really tough thing to see and talk about, but it sounds like it is. I can also only imagine how fulfilling it is to have, as you mentioned, a generational impact on families and children, and really see something that is at the moment broken and really help piece it back together and help these families thrive. That is like truly what a gift to, one, please do for the community, but to experience.
It is. And I often tell people, once you've had a role in helping change the arc of a child's life, that's a reward you will chase the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But you're exactly right. Hard, challenging. Sometimes the wins feel really small. And that's what our CASA managers, our staff, work with volunteers to help them with that next step. And how do we piece together these small victories to get finally to the child's forever family?
Yeah. And I mean, gosh, isn't that just a metaphor for life too? It is all about piecing together the small victories into the larger goal. God, that's amazing. And I love when Jen was on the show talking about Ronald McDonald House and the retention of volunteers. And you know that you have set up a phenomenal operation and organization, and you are collecting enough small wins and driving enough large impact that the retention is so high. I mean, truly 40% to be 5 years in such a challenging, emotionally challenging, and probably all sorts of challenging environment really speaks volumes to ProKids.
Well, it is definitely a team approach, and we are very lucky to attract people who are driven to make things better for kids.
Yeah.
And so the other thing I would say is the sense of community within the larger community.
Yeah.
It's just a beautiful thing to see when our volunteers gather, that sort of thing. And again, have to be completely transparent. Yes, what these kids have been through is distressing.
Yes.
Them not having a clear path to permanency is distressing. And so there is a certain amount of what we sometimes call distress tolerance that we all have to work through.
Yeah.
But we work through it together in order to, keep moving forward for the child.
I imagine that's part of the CASA training.
It is, and it's part of the relationship between the CASA and the CASA manager. It's very much a coaching relationship, etc. Because, one of the things is sometimes, there are occasions where volunteers will even doubt their impact when things are the least clear. And I remember one CASA in particular saying, maybe I should just get off the case. I don't think I'm making a difference. And when the subject was even broached with the child he was serving, the kid said, "Are you kidding me? You're the person who shows up for me. You're the person who helps me keep going."
It's amazing what kids really see.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the older children in particular, it's stunning sometimes because they will learn that the CASA is a volunteer. And that is especially meaningful to many of the older kids. They'll literally say, "You're the only adult in my life not paid to be here."
Oh my gosh. It's unbelievable what these kids pick up on and absorb. And especially in traumatic scenarios, you constantly are scanning for what is danger, where am I safe? And to have something that you're like, and it's hard to trust safety.
Right.
And to see an inkling of hope in safety, and then to see that continue to show up consistently is life-changing.
Yeah.
Because now you know what to look for in future relationships and future scenarios. I mean, it's so much more than already this enormous undertaking.
It is. You're right. It's both a lifelong lesson of what trust and good relationships look like.
Yeah.
But it's also very practical in terms of a teenager runs away from their foster care home. Guess who they're likely to contact first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Do you have kids who have been through the system and have been helped by CASAs come back and be CASAs?
So I can't say that we've had anyone directly come back. And part of the reason is even kids who consider, let's say, careers in the child protection system, sometimes what we just talk to them about as they're older, let's say college age, et cetera, is you just have to decide if the environment in which you experience trauma, do you want to kind of live there?
Yeah.
And so what we have found, right? So
Yeah.
what we have found is kids willing to come back, kids willing to help recruit volunteers. That's been lovely when that happens. And also, there are some of our CASAs who have their own experiences with child maltreatment. One of the things we just want to make sure is that they're in a place feeling healthy enough that this feels like a good thing for them to do.
Yeah. So they can truly be objective. Is that the right word?
Well, part of it is not making it too personal to them.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And so that it is about this child in front of them.
Yeah.
And that it also won't be such a trigger for them to hear about this child's experience that depending on where they are, kind of their healing, that it takes them back.
Right. No one needs that.
Yeah. So we have to, we navigate that. That's part of our interview and onboarding process. Our CASA training is both flexible, but also extensive.
Yes. I would hope. Yes.
Yeah. So we view it as a two-way interview. And really when we were talking before, all we're looking for, because I know this can sound like a lot, is for people to be curious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Truly. 10 hours a month does not sound like a lot.
It's doable.
And truly, you have done such a wonderful job highlighting the impact that you can make. And I mean, we all know from the little things in life, like even just making the red, the traffic light, those small wins still matter, truly. So if you really, I think you've done a wonderful job of painting like truly the need as well as how much impact is within reach.
Well, and that's what I think is especially surprising to people is when we explain to them, there are all sorts of outcome measures that we track. We have 24 of them, but the one we're best known for is that abuse and neglect stopped for 99% of the kids we served last year. And that's a rate we've now maintained for 25 years. That stuns people, partly because kind of the desperate straits that they know these kids are in, but also people doubt the power of a volunteer.
Yeah.
And we say, don't.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. When I think about all the volunteers that I have witnessed in my life, whether it be in schools or hospitals or whatever, the world revolves, it evolves, revolves, rotates, all of the above, because of volunteers.
Absolutely. I mean, their impact is absolutely incredible. I remember a magistrate saying once to us, again, they have heavy caseloads, and they said a CASA turns what would be another case back into a child.
Oh, God, that's amazing.
And that's vitally important when they're making life-changing decisions for these kids.
And we think about how precious childhood is. And you want these children to truly have a childhood and to give them access to that and to change the trajectory so that it can be an even better one. You were ever so kind to bring me a results summary sheet because you know how much I love data and research and insatiable curiosity. You guys, I would like to frame this and give this to everyone listening. It is unbelievable. But do you want to walk us through, I will let you use the cheat sheet, some of these amazing outcomes that your organization is able to have, because this was just so incredibly, to your point, motivating to be like, this is all within reach. And it's not just like we're talking like upper 90s. Again, back to the point we were saying off camera, that is perfection, 90 and above.
Well, I mean, I think the thing we think about is both, the stories of our kids are unbelievably powerful and important. And we also need to understand our aggregate impact. on kids' lives who've been abused and neglected. So as you can imagine, based on the trauma that our kids have experienced, some of the things we're doing is making sure that their mental health needs are identified and clinically assessed. So our goal around that is 85%. And in 2023, it was 93% of our kids.
Oh my God. 93% of children are getting access to the mental health care that they need and also being ensured safe home environment. Like it's so much more than just housing, rehousing, etc.
That's right. That's right.
It's amazing.
Another thing we think about is when we talked about kids moving is we really work hard on stability. So our goal is that 80% of kids will experience stability while under the court's jurisdiction. And in 2023, it was 87%.
Amazing. As we were saying, test after move, after my pillow smells different, and you're able to ensure that kind of stability, and probably coming from an environment where they didn't really even know what stability felt like.
And that often can be true. And to be clear, for all of these outcome measures, we're working really hard with our partners.
Sure, of course.
We need everyone to pull together to achieve this kind of
But
outcome.
what I love is that you guys seem to be in this linchpin role of you are the person pulling in all of the various and being the true quarterback and coordinator with these little kids standing right beside.
Well, and that's what a volunteer, again, with that gift of time, what they can help do is make sure that all of the decisions are being made, the social work decisions, even some healthcare decisions, some mental health decisions, as well as the ultimate decisions of the court are as fully informed as possible. In terms of our longer term goals, we are looking at our kids being stable after their case closed. We don't want them to re-enter the system.
Right.
So our goal is 95% of kids will experience stability after their case is closed. And in 2023, it was 100%.
Amazing. Amazing. So, and to know after everything that you've seen in case file after case file, that truly when the metaphorical folder is closed, that these kids are stable and secure.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, what a gift.
Well, that's the ultimate goal.
Right.
And here's what sounds very, very odd, maybe to some people in terms of a volunteer experience. But we do say the ultimate reward in an individual case is actually to be forgotten.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
That if we can get a child in an environment where their needs are so fully met that they don't dwell on their time in the system, holy cow, have we done our job.
Yeah. Wow. That is unbelievable. I love just how you sort of measure and approach that as well. And it is so and it just also goes to the selflessness of the act to be I want you to be so stable that you forget about me.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
It doesn't mean you still don't always carry that child in your heart.
I can only imagine.
And also the reward of helping them get from point A to point B.
Oh, absolutely.
It's it is unbelievably rewarding. It's like nothing else that I certainly have experienced, and I think many people have. So we sometimes call it the ProKids quicksand. You dip your toe in, you're likely to get pulled under.
Oh, I can only imagine. I'm already drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm oh, wow. Oh my God, just to imagine the impact. And also the amazing collaboration, adult to adult, peer to peer, and just finding like-minded people with similar passion to make sure that you're kind of all working towards this greater good. We're not working towards revenue goals and,
That's right.
Are we reducing the amount of plastic in a cap so it's cheaper to put this bottle or this tube of toothpaste into the world? Not to say that stuff doesn't matter,
right.
But if you're going to volunteer your time, what wonderful gifts to be surrounded by like-minded people under similar mission.
Absolutely. And the sense of community that you have, as hard as the work can be, this idea of how important what you're doing is for this individual child, for their future children, but also for our entire community.
Yeah.
It's an amazing feeling. And I think, again, people who think about, I can't read or see another story about child abuse and neglect, thinking now I can actually do something about it.
Oh, yeah. Right. And that is truly when anyone is ever swirling in life, it is because you feel so hopeless and powerless. And this does give you power and control to be able to make an impact on something that is so impactful on you that it makes you shut down.
Yeah. No, it's actually kind of amazing.
Yeah.
There are a lot of volunteer roles out there, but I can't think of another one that has this much power.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to, as we were like, well, first of all, do we have any more stats that you want to share? Because I'm really just loving them.
So one of the things is about educational placement and achievement of developmental milestones.
Right, because these kids will be adults.
Yes,
right.
Exactly. So part of what we're looking at across entire age range of our children, and we serve from the child who was born yesterday, we can serve children up through their 21st birthday.
Oh, nice.
So the court can maintain jurisdiction that long.
Yeah.
But our goal is that 90% of children will receive appropriate educational placement and achieve developmental milestones. And in 2023, it was 98% of our kids.
Amazing. Because like we think about raising our own children, we raise them to fly, to launch, to like go make their own impact and to have the tools and the resources. And not only are you getting these kids safe and secure and stable, but then to give them the resources to be able to create their own life.
Yeah. And educational advocacy is really critical to a lot of the work that we do.
It seems to be, yes.
It is partly because, kids who have been traumatized, kids who've been in, let's say, chaotic and violent environments, part of the way they navigate that is they study the faces in the room. They scan kind of constantly, looking for changes in microexpression that tell them something's about to happen. They might be about to be hit.
That like hypervigilance.
Correct.
Yeah.
If you put that in a classroom setting with 25 other students, if you are constantly scanning faces, looking for microexpressions, a couple of things are going to happen. One, you're not going to engage, participate, and learn.
Yeah.
You may overreact to a change in expression, which can cause you to end up in a disciplinary mode.
Yep.
All of that does not bode well for example, learning to read by third grade.
Right. It's also deeply exhausting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so if in terms of educational attainment, you're not making the shift around third grade from learning to read to reading to learn, the stats are that high school graduation becomes very difficult to achieve. And so part of what we have to address is how is that child able to show up in an educational space so that they can keep moving forward?
Yes.
And we talked a little bit earlier about the overlay of poverty and its relation, the cycle of poverty to the cycle of abuse and neglect. So obviously education is one of the ways to help break the cycle in the long term.
God, it is so multifaceted, but yet so intertwined.
Correct.
Everything, to your point with the micro wins, is so close. Everything feels within reach.
Yep.
And all the systems are sort of orbiting around each other. And that is why this CASA role in the team within this is so vital to really pulling all these pieces together. I was going to wrap the portion around ProKids and this whole conversation before we switch to more of women focused around how do you take care of yourself and in such a like tough to think about environment, but you have so clearly painted all of the benefits and all of the structure and all of the support that's in there. Like I don't need to ask. It's very clear that like it is very fulfilling, is very manageable, it is very supported. There are a lot of wins. It's phenomenal. I truly like my the light bulb has just been fully turned on. Truly, I really am so grateful for this conversation. Okay, I love to wrap every episode really just kind of pivoting to focusing more on if we're just talking to women out there, where I have sort of a set list of questions that I just love to choose from. And you had said that one of the ones that you wanted to talk about really was like, what did you learn the hard way? And I love asking that question because I feel like women especially, and men as well, are so inclined to then turn around to someone behind them and say, let me help you so you don't have to learn this the hard way. I've certainly been the recipient of that in many moments in my life, and they've been life-changing, and I try and do the same. So what have you learned the hard way that you would love to help others with?
So the thing that jumped out at me about that question is even when we lack a vocabulary about something, it feels less real. And so I know something that has really spoken to me is a phrase that is now regularly used, often applied to women, often applied to moms, which is the mental load that people bear. And, I've often talked to people about it, and we've described it as you might be sitting next to your partner on the sofa. They think you're watching TV with them. and you are literally going through the to-do list of the next week of everything.
The 99 tabs open in the brain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think even having the vocabulary around mental load
Ooh.
is unbelievably helpful because it allows for conversations around that.
Yeah.
That I think before that phrase was commonly known, people really didn't think about it. It's
No.
like, well, you just worry too much. And
Right.
you versus, no, we actually do have to think about, vacation or that's
Right.
school function or, whatever it is. I think that phrase and women owning it,
Yes.
that when they are the ones that bear the responsibility for a lot of the mental load, just being able to have conversations about that, both with friends, but also with their spouse.
Truly.
Right.
And I think I have experienced where like you take that role so seriously that you're like, no, this is my job to carry this mental load. When really you can absolutely share that. And I think women and mothers kind of have just sort of like manned the ship and they fear that, like I just did an episode last week around feminine energy and just sort of this notion of like letting someone else lead for a minute. And the example that I used was like, let's say you're out of tabs. The browser is full.
The computer's about to crash.
Yes. The wheel is spinning,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you're like, I can't do dinners this week. If you could just help me figure out dinners. You have to let go how that comes your way.
That's right.
Even if they're like, we DoorDash all week long.
Absolutely.
I'll DoorDash for us. I'll put it on the table, etc.
Yeah.
But like allow yourself the permission to ask for help and then relinquish the control for how it comes to you.
That's absolutely right.
That was a tough one for me to learn.
Yeah. And I think the other thing about that is also when you are needing to lead a certain effort, helping those around you to understand that a perfect question to ask is, what do you need me to do?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Versus us just automatically doing it all. We can help encourage that dialogue.
Yes.
Hey, when I'm frenzied and I'm driving toward a goal,
yes,
ask me, what can I do?
What can I do?
Mm-hmm.
And even that, like when I think about women supporting women and we're like, you're talking to your friend and you're sharing the mental load with your friend.
Yeah.
Instead of getting into the fixer mode, you can say, how can I help? Do you want me to listen?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want me I can listen, I can pump you up,
right.
I can take something off your plate.
Right.
And like, sometimes just to even be heard like that is really life-changing.
I agree. And understanding that it's real and it's real labor and the labor is important to your family, to your friends, to your community.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mental load is labor, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And it is really wild how vast the mind is. It seems to not run out of browsers. But I love that. And it's just even like, it does kind of feel like the burden to bear in quiet, but to have that conversation does sound, as I'm learning, baby steps. Mm-hmm. Asking for what I need still makes me a little sweaty, but I'm working on it. But it is life-changing.
Yeah.
It is like, you don't have to carry this all by yourself. Yeah. It is not meant to be carried. Like we are built as humans in community.
That's right. That's exactly right.
I love that. I love that so much. Thank you for sharing. Mm-hmm. Okay. So to wrap us up, thank you for sharing this amazing perspective that I think people really needed to hear. You have made it, it is incredibly important, and you shed light on that and somehow made it less daunting and more tangible to be able to go out and make a difference. If we could make 1 ounce of impact with this episode today, what can we ask people to do in our community?
Really, all we need people to do is be just a little bit curious.
Yeah.
We don't ask you to take dive into the deep end. We just ask you to wade into the zero depth pool.
Yeah.
And the way that people can do that is go to our website, ProKids.org. If you click on volunteer, you'll see informational sessions. We do them both in person and online.
Yeah.
We also have something we call Donut Wednesdays, where people can even more informally stop by and learn more about what we do.
And they're donuts?
There are donuts.
I'm highly motivated by donuts. Just being honest.
Right?
I'm like, did you say donuts?
There are donuts. There are donuts.
I'm coming. But I love that. Like, just be curious. Just open your heart and your mind and bring a friend.
Absolutely. Because part of what we found is So many of our volunteers will say to themselves, well, I don't have a background in social work. I'm not a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
How can I possibly help? And what they need to understand is we are set up for how to introduce you to the role, how to train you for the role, how to
Mm-hmm.
support you for the role. And so really all we need is some first steps just to be
Yeah.
curious. And many of our volunteers have said the reason why I ended up taking the plunge and learning more was because somebody said to me, you might be good at this.
Oh,
Well, even if it ends up not being the role for you, you knowing a little more means you can help us spread the word.
yes. You read my mind.
Right? And tell a
Yes.
friend, tell a colleague, tell a
Yes.
neighbor,
Yes.
I think you might be good at this.
Yes. And like if you have those little kids in the back of your mind to motivate you, think, oh, I don't know if I'll ever stop thinking about the baby on the corner in the diaper.
Mm-hmm.
They deserve, so deeply deserve everyone's love and attention.
That's right.
Oh my God, Tracy, this has just been an absolute pleasure of a conversation. And I have such gratitude for just the opportunity to support you and your mission and ProKids and the amazing work that you do. Thank you for what you do. I hope that this episode helps spread that curiosity and that awareness. It has certainly changed my understanding in a really important way. So I'm very grateful. If anyone out there, please help us spread the word, share this episode, have these conversations. These are things that we can talk about, and we don't have to shy away and be afraid. There are no sidelines in this conversation. I love how you put that. So I am so grateful. Let's change the trajectory for these children, for generations to come, for the parents that are currently in the mix of it. The impact, as you have explained, is far and wide.
It is. And Betsy, I can't thank you enough. We talked about our kids being hidden, and what you've done today by using your platform is you've helped them be more visible.
It is truly an honor. Thank you. All right, you guys. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Well, that's the end of this episode, but promise me, you won't stop here with whatever it is you're feeling or dreaming about. I hope you leave today feeling empowered to live life just as you see fit. If this podcast was helpful to you, it would mean the world to me if you could leave a review on whatever platform you're listening on. I genuinely just want to help women live the life they dream about. So if this type of content tracks with you, subscribe to this podcast or visit our website, writeyourOwnstory.co, to download digital courses or to grab a journal and a mug to just dream in and dream with. It's your life, lady. Do you. And just remember, I'm rooting for you, and you've totally got this.